Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to remind you each and every day, it expands our base. 21 days until the election. That's where we're at right now. And I want to talk with you bluntly about some developments in the process of electing a president. One of the things that I've always enjoyed about politics is its finality. That is to say, you know a winner and you know a loser. And there is a campaign that brings us to the point where you have a winner or loser, and there's a finality about it. There's no ambiguity about it. Well, not in the last campaign, and not in this campaign. Let's begin with Senator Vance, who was interviewed by the New York Times on Friday and was asked not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 5 times, who won the election in 2020. And of course, the answer to the question is Joe Biden. But if you listened carefully, you heard Senator JD Vance declined to say that Biden won. In other words, there was an ambiguity in his mind. Of course, he is the vice presidential nominee for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is still thundering across the land that he won the election, that it was stolen from him. Let's be clear. When I turn on right-wing radio and television, as I did this weekend, and I heard doubts being raised about whether or not the election this year will be fair and free, when I have already been informed of efforts to subvert the election in a variety of states, you have to stop and you have to pause and you have to think. Is Donald Trump more interested in himself, or is he more interested in preserving American democracy? I hate to ask this question because, frankly, until Donald Trump, we never had to ask a question like this in the days preceding an election or the days after an election. But when I am invited, as I have been repeatedly by groups, to speak about this election, after the election, I tell them, let's do it at least a week after November 5th. Why? Why would I want to wait? Because the general consensus is that we won't know on election night. We may not know until days after the election who won. This is an unprecedented moment in American politics. I watched 60 Minutes last night as the Secretary of State, the state of Pennsylvania, who is a Republican, had to affirm repeatedly that indeed the election in Pennsylvania would be fair and free, had to point out that although he is a Republican, his job is to make sure the votes are counted. That is what the Secretary of State of the state of Pennsylvania had to say. And he is a Republican. When you have the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, when you have people in the Republican Party who are concerned about this, well, that should alert all of us to a serious problem. Now, I don't care if you're for Donald Trump or against Donald Trump. That's your decision. That's your choice. But can you imagine a candidate for president of the United States who refuses to acknowledge the legitimacy of a previous American election and who is casting doubt on an upcoming American election? This, to me, is incomprehensible. And as for J.D. Vance, a man who is viewed by many as a rising star, I understand that you have to work with the head of your ticket. I understand you don't want to offend Donald Trump. But really, Senator, we know who won the election. You know who won the election. And to have doubts being cast on the legitimacy of the election 4 years ago in advance of an election that is only 21 days away? My friends, I am concerned about the future of our country. I am concerned about the future of how we relate to elections. And one more thing, while we're at it, the excessive rhetoric of Donald Trump on the question of immigration, his blasting and saying that he will deport, well, a lot of people when he doesn't have the power to do it, when he shouldn't have the power to do it, when we are a nation of laws, not of men. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, suggested this last week that Donald Trump was a fascist. I do not like using terms like fascist, nor do I appreciate Donald Trump's statement that it's Comrade Kamala, as if she is a communist or a Marxist. I don't appreciate excessive rhetoric, but I can tell you this. If Donald Trump does win on November 5th, and he does try mass deportations, and he does fulfill some of the promises he is making in advance of the election, our democracy will be sorely tested. I sat with a good friend of mine who is voting for Donald Trump, and I asked him how in the world he could do it, based on all of this. And his answer was, well, it's just campaign rhetoric. We learned on January 6th that when Donald Trump speaks, people listen. We learned on January 6th that he can and he has incited insurrection. We know that if he wins the election, all the charges against him will be dismissed. That's not American democracy. He should have to go to court and face what he did in a court of public opinion and public law. This is not the America that I have believed in. Although, if Donald Trump goes down to defeat, it will be. I listened to Liz Cheney, and I reread her book. Her case against Donald Trump is so solid. But will the American people listen? If you believe the polls, everything is very close. We are a divided nation. I hope that the better angels of this nation sing out the word that we believe in the American system, that we believe in fair and free elections, that we reject the kinds of rhetorical flourishes being offered by Trump and Vance. That's my hope as we approach the election. Every day is filled with drama, and we will continue to talk about it all the way until the election is decided. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which, of course, is our goal. You can interact with me on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and I appreciate all your comments. So many of you do. I appreciate it. And now to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. Thanks, Gogo. You do a great job. I'll see you tomorrow right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. Have a great day. Around the Political World with John Rothman is proud to introduce our first sponsor. That's right. We have someone who loves what we do, and I have to tell you, I love what she does. Be Bold America is produced by KSQD, and of course, the person who leads us through these great discussions is none other than Jill Cody. She's an author, a radio personality, and she does one heck of a job of putting into focus major issues, from protecting democracy to our climate. Let me tell you, the topics on the podcast are serious. It's not for the faint of heart, but that's to say the show is for all of us. Be bold in America. In an election year, what can we do to increase discussion, debate, and the rest? I'll tell you what we can do. Listen to Jill Cody as she exposes all of us to the issues. You can tune in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you like to get your shows. So this is John Rothman, delighted, pleased, thrilled to endorse Jill Cody's wonderful program, Be Bold, America.